Happy football season, Connor. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to be here. I feel like week 0 isn't really the start of college football season. Like week 1 is where we really get things going. But, I mean, it's just nice to be at this point and not be in the offseason anymore.
So you're telling me you haven't made your Final Four based upon the games that were played this past Saturday?
No, I mean, that's cheap. If you're going to wait to do that and then be like, oh, yeah, now I'm going to put Notre Dame into my Final Four, like, come on. Yeah, no, those are done at the end of May. I mean, come on, the college football offseason is a long one. Got the takes cranking out much earlier than that.
Speaking of Notre Dame, what are your thoughts on Hartman? I didn't know he was a 4-year starter there at Wake Forest. And, Connor, a lot of times we talk with these quarterbacks, I preach in reps, man. They've seen a lot. Do you think anyway, if he stays healthy, Notre Dame doesn't win at least 9 this year?
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, the combination of a Marcus Freeman defense and a Sam Hartman offense is really promising. The big question with Notre Dame is always going to be, can they get that margin for error? What does it really look like? You don't have a conference championship to play in. These 3 games will define their season. You've got Ohio State, you've got Clemson, and then obviously you've got to be able to beat USC, who was talked about a lot over the weekend. But even if you just go 2-1 in those games, and you feel like, oh, we should be set up pretty well, there's always that question of, well, without a conference title, are you really worthy of that? Sam Hartman's different than any quarterback they've had since Brady Quinn. And I'm kind of surprised that there are still some people doubting his ability because of the unique offense he played at Wake Forest, where he holds the ball at the mesh point longer than anybody in college football. But there's also, I mean, a post-snap procedure to reading safeties that goes with that should translate really, really well. And we saw it on Saturday. I mean, the guy was absolutely awesome. I think he's going to put up some big numbers this year. He'll be part of the Heisman Trophy conversation. Notre Dame's going to be a threat.
Connor, is there a team in the Southeastern Conference that somehow may have changed your feeling about them over the course of the last 4 weeks? You know, is there anything you learned that you didn't know going into camp in the SEC that has changed your outlook on a specific team?
Maybe not on a specific team, but I was of the belief that Ty Simpson was going to win the starting job at Alabama, that he was going to have a path to become a Heisman Trophy finalist, and that Alabama was going to win the West. And I'm still of the belief that Alabama will win the West. It just might end up being with Jalen Milroe as the guy leading him there. If you've seen, and I don't have to tell Arkansas fans about this, after the play that he made in the second half of that game on 3rd and 15, which was just ridiculous. But there are a lot more people saying that he can take hold of this job. And then Nick Saban comes out and says he's improved his presence in the pocket, then that's a game changer. And that changes what this Alabama offense, which has very, very low expectations post-spring after Tyler Buxton comes in from Notre Dame, that changes what we think this offense could be capable of. So I say if there's a big thing that I've kind of moved off of, it's my belief that Ty Simpson is going to be the guy, and he's going to take over the starting job. Jalen Milroe probably has the best chance to do that.
Connor, on Thursday, the Florida Gators travel to Utah. What are your thoughts there? Is Florida on the come this year, or do you think they're a team that can't make a bowl game?
Man, 6-6 feels like what this team is staring at. Now, not all 6-6 seasons are created equally, right? Like, if Florida is able to beat Tennessee at home and then beat Florida State at home to close out the regular season, maybe a playoff hopeful Florida State, that changes what we feel 6-6 really looks like. Now, I think that this opportunity on Thursday night for Billy Napier is huge. But sooner or later, you've got to start proving people wrong. That's what this comes down to. And it's great that Florida's recruiting at such a high level. They have a number 3 class in 2024. Billy Napier has done exactly what Dan Mullen couldn't do, which was recruit. Yet at the same time, you need to start putting it together on the field, because I don't think his job is in jeopardy with a $31 million buyout. But if they have a 6-6 year that doesn't really have a whole lot of those wins that you feel like he really proved people wrong, then he goes into next year with the hottest seat of any coach in America, with probably the most difficult schedule of any team in America. So this opportunity for him on Thursday night at Utah, a team who hasn't lost at home in front of its fans since 2018. I mean, this is a really, really big early season moment for Billy Napier.
Which team in the SEC made themselves over more through the transfer portal? This has been my biggest question. There's so many numbers going into this season. I think Arkansas's got 15 transfers that are going to get a good amount of playing time. On the two deep alone, defensively today, Connor, that they released 9 transfers, new transfers this year. What team at the top of your list, or a couple of them that stand out, remade themselves in positive ways that you think through the transfer portal?
Arkansas is definitely one of them. Auburn's the biggest one. Hugh Freeze has got 19 guys out of the portal. And, I mean, they've got offensive linemen from the portal, from the group of 5 ranks. They've got receivers that they dipped into the portal to get, some of which were kind of headliner guys who don't even look like they're going to be in significant roles early on. But Hugh Freeze did a tremendous job, and he had to. It was a one-way street with the portal when Brian Harsin was there. And to be able to compete in the toughest division in college football, you have to be willing to say, look, we just need guys who have been in a strength program for 3 or 4 years that can go out there and give us a chance. And I think Auburn's got a much better chance to be able to kind of keep its head above water in the West. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to compete for anything meaningful other than positive momentum and feeling like they're not going to get swallowed whole in the new SEC next year. But I think they're going to be in a really good place from what they did in the portal to be able to help that roster pretty much overnight.
Any surprise that Thorne is the starting quarterback coming in from Michigan State? He had a good year 2 years ago. They won 10 games. Wasn't very good last year. Then goes through spring ball with Michigan State, and then Freeze announces him as the starter now, saying he's leadership and he knows the offense better. He's been with the team for 3 months.
It's not a surprise, and here's why. And I'll actually go back to Arkansas as the example that I use for this. Hugh Freeze wanted a proof of concept for his offense. Robbie Ashford was not going to give them the proof of concept that they needed. You could easily default to his strengths, like they did down the stretch last year when Cadillac Williams was the head coach, and say, we're basically going to be a service academy. We're going to run the football that much, but that's not the offense that Hugh Freeze wants to run with Philip Montgomery there as his play caller. They want to be able to have more balance. They want to be able to stretch the field and just keep teams off balance. And Peyton Thorne gives them a better chance to do that than Robbie Ashford did. Now, obviously, there are questions about him, and he had, I think, 3 different instances last year in which he was benched in a game, and it didn't really look very good post Kenneth Walker III. But at the same time, I go back to what Arkansas did early on, where Felipe Franks was the quarterback to start off the Stan Pittman era, when a lot of people thought, hey, KJ should be the guy. You should put your faith in him, let him get those reps. It's not like you're on the hot seat or anything, but you needed that proof of concept for the guy who could run the system that Kendall Briles wanted to run, and Felipe showed that he could do that. And so it allowed KJ to develop, and that's, I think, kind of the hope that Auburn's going to have for Robbie Ashford.
Looking around the country and looking at some first-year coaches, Colorado was so bad last year. You think they will be improved. What's reasonable expectations for Deion Sanders' Colorado Buffaloes? And they open at TCU.
Yeah, maybe a bowl game is realistic, but think about this, and this is the point that I've brought up a couple times throughout the offseason. I'm not sure if people realize this. Colorado has been to 1 bowl game in the last 15 years. That's it. I mean, they were a train wreck last year. They went 1-11. The only game that they won was against Cal. And everybody's been talking about all that Deion Sanders has done in the transfer portal because it's historic to do what he did. I think they have, 57 guys that they got from the portal. I mean, it's crazy the amount of roster turnover. It's truly unprecedented. But at the same time, Pac-12 is still really good. Pac-12 has a bunch of games in there where you're like, well, they're going to be probably 2-touchdown underdog there. Oh, and by the way, you've got the defending runner-up TCU team in the season opener. Good luck with that one. So I think, for those who are saying, if Deion goes 5-7, 6-6, this is a failure, I don't think that's the case at all. I just think they have a really difficult schedule, and it's a major, major historic uphill climb that they have to make.
Is there a chance the top of the Big Ten is better than the top of the SEC this year? I see a lot of picks for the playoff that include Ohio State and Penn State, or Michigan and Penn State, or Michigan and Ohio State, and not a lot that are picking Georgia and Alabama, or Georgia and LSU. Is there any difference between what we've seen recently of SEC dominance, not just because of the top, but really the middle and the bottom of the league too? Is the Big Ten potentially better at the top this year?
No. No. Look, I say that as a Big Ten grad. I've covered several different Big Ten teams. I've watched this conference very, very closely, but until we actually see it at the top, no. I can't get on board with that. For all this talk about Michigan winning a national championship, this is the biggest thing that gives me skepticism. The last 6 seasons, they have played 7 Power 5 teams outside of the Big Ten who went to a bowl game. They went 1-6 in those games. Can we see Michigan actually do it against a team that matters before we crown them? Because it's all well and good that they beat up on Purdue. It's great that they finally have a winning streak against Ohio State. But what are we doing here? Show me anybody that Penn State beat of any sort of relevance. Show me the last time that James Franklin went on the road and beat a team he wasn't supposed to beat. To me, that's the biggest thing, and I've seen Ohio State side by side. When was the last time Ohio State beat an SEC team? Think about that. I mean, I can't get there with this notion that the Big Ten is at that level at the top. And for a conference that has 2 national championships in the 21st century, I mean, I just don't even think that's a fair thing to say at this point, despite the fact that obviously they look like they have more of that preseason playoff buzz because of the notion that they could have Ohio State and Michigan both getting in there again this year.
Maybe the best quarterback matchup in opening week is Drake May and Spencer Rattler, UNC at South Carolina. Should South Carolina be worried about this UNC team?
They should be. I mean, yeah, South Carolina's 2.5-point underdogs. And it's a game that, look, if you've seen what Drake May can do, yeah, you should be worried every single time. I know he faded down the stretch last year, but, man, he is so fun when he gets rolling. And I know they got a new offensive coordinator in there. Phil Longo's off to Wisconsin, which is going to be an entirely different set of circumstances in and of itself. But seeing what Drake May can do potentially without his top receiver in the season opener, still waiting to hear back on his appeal for eligibility. But that matchup is going to be so fun because Spencer Rattler still has so many of these questions. Is he the guy that finished the season kind of looking like that former preseason number 1 overall pick, or is he going to revert back to who he was really in the first 2.5 months of the regular season? It's going to be really fun to see. Over-under for that one, 64.5. We should get some fireworks. Best preseason opening matchup for quarterbacks, though, is probably going to be the one that's in my neck of the woods. Jaden Daniels, Jordan Travis, 2 preseason top 3, top 4 type quarterbacks in college football. But, yeah, there are a couple of really, really nice quarterback matchups week 1.
Well, that's where I was going to finish with you on LSU, Florida State. I mean, the feeling is either one of these two, the winner of this team sees a path to the playoff, but I think LSU still has a path no matter what because they play in the SEC West.
And Florida State's schedule is easier than Notre Dame's schedule. You know, you talk about winning this game. Who else do they have to play later on in the year?
Connor, where do you see LSU as potentially deficient heading into the first game, which is the biggest game of the season for at least week 1?
It's in the secondary. It's totally in the secondary. And Jordan Travis is the guy that could absolutely expose that. I mean, they have major, major questions in their defensive backfield, which last year I thought they did a good job putting it together with some pieces in the portal, some pieces that Arkansas fans are familiar with as well. But this year, man, I just don't know what it's going to look like if they can't get home. And especially without Mason Smith, who's suspended for the season opener for that just bogus NCAA violation. If they can't get home, man, Jordan Travis is the guy that can extend plays. And with those receivers that they have to work with, Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman comes in from Michigan State, Shaheem Bell from South Carolina, he has some dudes that could just go up and get 50-50 battles. And I think that's going to be a really, really difficult matchup for that secondary in the opener. That's where their weakness is. I think if you can get a guy who can extend plays and get you on the back end, they could be in some real trouble in some of these spots. And LSU could have some of these games where they play down to their competition more than people might think, given their lofty preseason ranking.